Here we go. Here we are. Yeah. Tayo, missed the woo. Here I am with the woo. I'm back in the saddle again. That's for Tom Lukeson. Man. So I finished lots of thoughts. I finished Little Big. That's where I want to start. Little life update here at the beginning. That book is phenomenal. I don't know. I need to sit on it for a while, chew on it, figure out where it. Maybe I should stop doing us. I saw some TikTok the other day where some younger, what do you call them, Zoomer? I was listening to Foxman and Christian last night too, which I didn't realize President Foxman was that young. It's fantastic. I love the fact that somebody in their early 20s is in here in the TLC world. But Phlebas, Nathaniel, what up? Ron, hey buddy. And but I saw some TikTok of some young girl who's realizing with her grandparents that she can't speak without fillers. Like that, like and saying like constantly. My wife is very good at trying to redirect and point that out when our children do it or when I do it. A lot of it has to do with even, I think, is one. A lot of it has to do with speed of speaking. And if I were to slow down and really work on it, I could probably speak without using a lot of fillers. But that would be, I'm not going to do that this morning. So Little Big is really, really good. However, it's not an easy book. It really reminds me of, it was written in 1981 by this guy, John Crowley. It really reminds me of George MacDonald. It's a modern fairy story. I was trying to get Sherry to read it. I sent her an email, and here's a confession. This is this is a pride thing that I was thinking about. So if Sherry watches this, forgive me, but this is what I was thinking. This is an insight into myself, truly. Because Sherry's a big George MacDonald person. She's gone deep down that path and deep into those wells. She leads discussion groups on his essays and books and works and has really dove into George MacDonald and read George MacDonald much more extensively than I have. But then sometimes I think this is my pride / also acknowledgement in a gifting that I think I have, which is I'm a quality detector. And so, like George MacDonald, the discussion around George MacDonald in this little corner in Grail country, that started with this guy. I was talking about George MacDonald. I was talking about George MacDonald's Justice Sermon and Lilith, and I turned Sherry onto George MacDonald. And so, like, I was pushing Little Big, and I'm saying this is good. And I realized in a world full of content and with many voices out there, and the bigger that the corner gets, there's lots of people saying, look at this. This is important. Look at this. And I'm just like, man, trust me. I'm going to turn you on to George MacDonald. This book is good. And it really is good. It's the kind of book that has lots of depth, and you could reread it multiple times and never exhaust it. It's hard to even talk about because it's that good. And it's really, really fantastic. I don't know where it fits in my hierarchy of quality books. Because the way that I think about books often is also, I think like if I were to die, these are books that I want my children to read. I kind of think that way because I almost feel like I have a list of books, or like I'll have a playlist, music, certain songs. There's certain music, certain books, certain films that I feel like are just, they're like a artistic mosaic that captures the deep calls to deep. They resonate with me so much. Mills, I see you. I've been busy trying to finish this book. I need to find those articles. You reach out to me on Discord about those articles of on orthodoxy and the purification of atheism. maybe later on, if I open this up and other people are talking, I'll go find them and bring them up or something. But so anyhow, Little Big is fantastic, highly recommended. And but it's not. I had to listen to it on audio because it's a substantive book, substantial, and and I had to just listen to audio to get through it and multitask. And it's not a great. Even John Crowley reads it, at least the version I had, and it's the kind of book. It doesn't lend to audio. It's not great. It's not a great audiobook. And I feel like it's really it's at its best being read, but it's not an easy read. It's kind of like Lilith. You say, well, it's a fairy story, and it kind of is a fairy story. But I also learned this: the categories between high fantasy, low fantasy, and then magical realism. I didn't know these literary categories. So like high fantasy is like a completely made up world, like Lord of the Rings, Silmarillion. High fantasy. Then low fantasy is kind of a in-between world where there are magical elements, but it's set in the real world, air quotes again, which there isn't such thing. Tom Waits, I would say, all of it's folk. And so so like Harry Potter is one of those, there's muggles and there's the real people, and it's the world mixed in with magic. And then there's magical realism, which is, I think the way they describe it is it's just, magic is there and it's just part of the world. It's just assumed. It's not like a blending. It's not kind of a divided world. It's just part of the world. I think that I don't know. I think that's the way this book is. I think, anyhow, it's wonderful. What else do I want to talk about? I was just trying to catch up on some things. So I was listening to Foxman and Christian last night. That was a great conversation. It's really interesting to hear about a lot of things that they have to say, some of the struggles in the little corner, dealing with ego and trying to get clicks. And, that's kind of the difference between Christian YouTube and this little corner of the internet, I think. And exactly, this is it. Biz, fellow seekers. That's right. Tunji. Yeah, is that how you say it? I asked you once already. Tunji, I think that's correct. And yeah, the mustache is getting twirl. It's getting ridiculous. Dude, so Ursula Le Guin, if you look up Little Big, the Wikipedia, since you brought it up, I want to read, I still have it up in my phone, I need to turn towards my microphone, some of the praise for Little Big, because it's like one of those books that people haven't heard of, but literary significance. So Harold Bloom, who I don't know who that is, he's a literary critic, included in his work The Western Canon, calling it a, quote, neglected masterpiece, the closest achievement we have to the Alice stories of Lewis Carroll. Bloom also recorded that based on their correspondence, poet James Merrill loved the book. Thomas M. Dish described Little Big as the best fantasy novel ever, period. Ursula Le Guin wrote that Little Big is a book that all by itself calls for a redefinition of fantasy. It's so good, man. It's really Paul D. Filippo. I don't know who that is either. It's hard to imagine a more satisfying work, both on the artistic and emotional level. It's awesome, and I feel like it's one of those works that I feel like I barely scratched the surface. So some of the only books I've ever read twice are some of my favorites. So the Ransom trilogy, Lewis's Ransom trilogy, unbelievable. Changed the way I perceive the world. I need to reread Lilith. Lilith's in that category. Loris is another book that's like that. Silence I've read multiple times. Love it. Absolutely love it. And this book will be in there. It is, it's a little headier and more intellectual. Like, he's obviously very well read. There's all these great quotes. The way he lays out his chapter. Samuel Johnson, one of the quotes that I love that I just saw. I haven't delved deeply into Samuel Johnson, but a quote that I love that I talk about all the time. This book also deals with memory a lot, memory castles. Piranesi is a book that I love that's related. But Samuel Johnson has this quote, "Memory is the purveyor of reason," which is one of those quotes. It's like one of those little, just one of those little nuggets that is infinitely deep. It's an icon. Like you could think about that phrase and meditate on that phrase and chew on it, ruminate on that phrase, and never plumb the depths of it. It's just so good, man. They're quoting Augustine in it. It's lovely, lovely, lovely. That's a book that you could, interestingly, this is kind of how the book is laid out with Edgewood. You could enter into that book and never exhaust it and never leave it. And it's talking about particulars, but it's also talking about everything. When I talk about anything, I'm talking about everything. It's a Lukeism. It's so good, man. So good. Get pumped up. That's right, Lance. What? That Filippo person, one of the primary organizers of the art comments? I have no idea. Probably, because that's how weird the world is and how it works. Dude, God bless you. God bless you. We were talking about Tombstone last night too, because somebody was saying it was Doc Holliday-ish. I don't know who this is, Tunji, unfortunately. I am not really a well-read person. I just play one on YouTube. What's up, Bob? So what else? The other thing I want to talk about before opening this sucker up, magical realism, is how to talk about this. I made an unlisted video on my YouTube that I'll maybe, who's the writer or what? You talking about John Crowley, Little Big. And I know you do audiobooks. I don't recommend the audiobook, but I'd rather have you read the audiobook than not read it. It's fantastic. So Lance, you affirming beautiful bastard. Thank you. All right. I was watching, one of the things I was catching up on, because I took a big break from the corner to just like pound out this audiobook. One of the things I was catching up on is my boy Sam Tiedemann's conversation with Paul Anleitner. Look at my neck veins. T-Grog, love you, buddy. Love you. I want you to come in here when I open this up. Pseudo-profound bullshit. That's what I if I had a PhD, it would be in pseudo-profound bullshit. So I was catching up on Sam's conversation with Paul about AI and healthcare, particularly emergency rooms. And I'm very interested in that topic. I actually would love, I'm going to try to coordinate. I emailed a friend of mine who's a general practitioner, MD, who does direct primary care in Wichita. And he's a great friend. We don't live by each other. We don't talk as much as I would like. I really love this guy. He's been a huge influence in my life, and I miss him, and I kind of wish we lived by each other. Every time we talk, we say that. And he's fantastic in a lot of ways. I would love for him to talk with Sam, because he's brilliant. He's one of the smartest guys I've ever known, and I would love for him to talk to Sam about healthcare and AI, because I'm sure he has tons of interesting insights on that whole conversation. But that conversation with Paul was really excellent. And I haven't made quite all the way through it, but I made a bunch of comments, and it's really fascinating. But there was one point in it, I can't remember what it was, but Sam made the point that, like, just really AI, this is where I want to go with it, and it applies to my unlisted video and practical embodied knowledge versus propositional knowledge, and the myth. This will apply to T-Grog, the myth of rationalism, because they said somewhere in there, like, we have this idea that AI, it's a lot of AI hopes. The AI utopians, you could say, are kind of the Sam Harrises of the world that just think like high IQ. You just think like if somebody had an infinitely high IQ and AI, like they would just all of a sudden make ethical decisions. And I'm just like, no. And Vervaeke gets that. Sam and Vervaeke got into that some with care. And Vervaeke, I think, really realizes that you need embodiment for care, because that's how he distinguished intellect from rationality. The intellect does not care. Straight intellect doesn't care. It's probably like what I would call egoic intellect. But rationality, he would say, is necessary. I think Vervaeke would say this is necessarily, I would say, incarnational, embodied, and that is the rootedness, the earthliness, the divine Sophia, maybe, that grounds you, that roots you in care, because you need to care about your body, or else, because if your body dies, it's tethered with the old mind, and unless we're just like need to escape this den of suffering into our Gnostic utopianism of just pure mind, which I think is anti-reality. Anyhow, that's this assumption that's kind of baked into these AI utopians. And to me, it just seems so apparently dumb. This is why I call those sorts of people smart, dumb people. Anyhow, so the practical part of this is, okay, how to talk about it. There's a couple real life illustrations that have happened with me recently. So I'm going to talk about this. I think it's fine. So I recently replaced a couple valve stems, and because the faucet broke in my house, and I have this. I don't know. I love my house. I have this really cool older house. It was built in like 1960 or something like that, I think. And basically, a lot of it's original. I haven't redone a lot of things. The guy who built it and designed it lived in it until a couple weeks before he died, and we're the second owners of this house, and it's fantastic. Like, there haven't been any superficial update. I hate when a lot in modern houses, I hate the updates because they're cheap and superficial and chitsy, and there's very low quality, and I hate it. And so I'm very happy this house hasn't been redone, because it would drive me nuts, because if I'm going to redo a house, I'm going to redo it nicely or not at all. And so I had this old Crane faucet. It's this plumbing manufacturer, and I found a company that remakes these, because Crane is no longer in business, who remakes the parts for it so that I could fix this faucet. And I'm relatively handy, I guess. If you like just look at the bell curve, I'm on the handier side of that, because I've worked with my hands a lot of my life and grew up that way on a cattle ranch. My dad was a carpenter, and grew up on the ranch. But I'm not an expert. And so anytime you are working on something where you're not, this is very Polanyi, subsidiary focal integration. Anytime you're working on something new, learning a new skill, it takes all your attention, your focus, and you got to really pay attention to stuff before you embody it. And then you can do it, like Chad laying tile. He's not thinking about it. He's listening to books, talking on the phone, interacting with people, because he knows how to do all that stuff. Whereas someone who doesn't have all those skills would have to really focus on it to learn the skills and build the neural networks, cognitive science, into your mind, so that you can, because you take that focus, you integrate it, and it becomes subsidiary focal integration. Michael Polanyi, talking about modernist assumptions of knowledge. And so I'm focusing on this faucet, but I'm also not that practically minded, and so I'm not choosing to do it on the best times. And so one time when I decided to do it was a Saturday where all my kids were home and my wife was trying to sleep. Probably not the best time to do it. And then I got into the middle of it, and it's, this is like anything. Experts make things look easy. NBA players make playing in the NBA look easy. Someone who's a plumber makes a plumbing job look easy. The kind of job that would take me like maybe a day to figure out, somebody who's a very skilled plumber, like I have a friend who's a very skilled plumber, actually my godfather, my godparent, sponsor, could come in and probably do the same job in like 10 minutes and just be done. But that's because he's put in the time, the 10,000 hours, the skill, he's done all the subsidiary focal integration. So I'm doing this and I got to focus on it. And I'm also trying to be quiet. It's just a bad time. And so then I have the water turned off at different times. And then we go away for the weekend. We come back, and then I'm just trying to knock it out really quick, just so that we have a functioning bathroom. And I'm trying to do it thinking about my wife and my family, because that would just be nice to do it. However, I don't inform my wife that I'm going to turn off the water. So then I go and turn off the water, and she goes to water the plants. Can't water the plants because the water's turned off. And in her mind, she's just like, why don't you, like, it would just be nice if you just told me you were going to do that before you just do it. And in my mind, I'm thinking like, I think I know how to do it now, and I can knock it out in about 10 minutes and just be done with it. and she was busy doing something at the time. And so there was this very practical, embodied, real life example. I was talking to, so I shared this video with some friends from the corner. It's unlisted, where I'm explaining this whole situation. And then I'm getting all this feedback about it, and I'm telling them that, like, on one hand, all of this dojoing, intellectual, thinky-talky stuff that we talk about all the time in this little corner is very, in one sense, it's very practical, and I want to use this practical illustration of the sink and the faucets, and then another one with my son to illustrate some of these thinky-talky things that we think about and why all this stuff has legs in real life, or should, theoretically. So, so I'm doing all this. I get the faucet. So then we have that interaction, which is a negative interaction. So I'm trying to do something for the family. I'm trying to probably surprise my wife so that I get the faucet all put together. And she's like, man, that's great. Thank you for doing that. That's wonderful. I appreciate that. I love you. You know, I'm seeking affirmation and praise from my wife, right? Isn't what I get. It's just like, why are you being inconsiderate turning off the water? Or like, why aren't you more considerate in turning off the water? Like, or like more planned in when you're doing this, which is a legitimate criticism of me because I'm not, like, I don't, my days come together in a very haphazard way, if you can imagine. And then I get the faucet all put together, but because the way these faucets work, the handles now turn on and off differently than they did before. And so then my wife, who's a very, what's the word? Structured person, habituated, is just like, how easy would it be to switch those? Or like, can we switch those so that they turn the other way? And I'm thinking a lot of things. I'm thinking about 100 things, or at least 5. And I'm thinking just like, maybe, I'm not sure. How did I thread these valves in? Could I switch it? Would that ruin the washer that I just put in there? I don't want to do that. And so there's all these relational dynamics that are going on. And depending on a person's temperament, how they navigate all these situations is like, it's as varied as there are people, you know, according to God's varied grace, is a text that I often think of. When it's talking about the multiplicity of the body, each is gifted according to God's varied grace, is this passage in the New Testament. And as infinite as God, you know, almost. And sorry, that's probably heretical. Anselman, don't quote me on that. But maybe not. Might not be heretical. Might be good speculative theology. And so you know, like, you could just answer in that moment, no, we can't do that, and it's over. And then we just have to get used to the way the handles turn now. But I like being codependent, being like 88th percentile compassion. I'm like, I don't know, maybe. But then it just leads to all this more tension. And I'm thinking in all this is like, again, Jordan Hall, I learned this. Suffering is to undergo. And so this is just transformation. This is just part of life. This is just part of learning how to be in the world. It's part of learning how to love. This is almost the opposite of being a disembodied intellect. This is learning rationality. This is learning care. What does it really mean to love someone? What does it really mean to not insist on your own way? And then both of me and my wife end up getting pretty frustrated about this thing. When you really zoom out, 30,000 foot view, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, like on that level, right? None of this matters, you know, somewhat. But in this moment, like existentially, in this moment, to me, as someone who's like, as Little Big has this line in there, as someone who is a world weary sensitive, or a highly sensitive person, or whatever, somebody who is a pretty intense empath, codependent, however you want to frame it. You know, there are no solutions. There are only trade-offs. To be blessed is to be cursed as well. Foxman mentioned you earlier. I'm thinking like, it feels like if Chad was resonating with us, I shared the video with Chad. It feels like hell. And I've told my wife this, like, relational conflict and stress and tension with my wife, who is the most important person in the world to me, and whose approval I want more than anything. This is like the power of the feminine. It's the power of women. It's just like it's Helen of Troy. It's whatever. Like, she could wreck me with a word. It felt so terrible, and I'm trying to navigate it, because like, one thing you can do is just try to get through it and get past it and move on, and just make this stop. I just want this over. but I also really try to embody and live this shit that I talk about. Like, this isn't, what does it mean to love in that moment? And I thought of the Jordan Peterson of, like, anytime there's conflict, right? You have 3 options: slave, tyrant, work it out. And in this moment, I want this to be a learning moment. If I truly believe, like in Paralandra, the Ransom trilogy, that God is teaching you in every moment. If I really believe God is everywhere present, filling all things, where can I go to escape from your presence? If I ascend to the heights, you're there. If I go to the depths of Sheol, you're there. Psalm 139. God is teaching you in everything. I don't believe like a modernist physicalist. Sorry, T. Grog. What is God teaching me in this moment? What am I supposed to be doing? How am I supposed to be reacting in this moment? It isn't just to like make this go away, shove this under the rug, because like no one gets away with anything. I really believe that. Peterson says that. I think it's true. I like that from psychoanalysis and Freud and Jung. You'll just sweep it under the rug and it will bubble up and come out sideways, some ways, somewhere else. And so in this moment, I'm just thinking like, because me and my wife were just going back and forth. Well, like, this is what I was thinking and this is what I was feeling. And I'm like, okay, I acknowledge that. This is what I was thinking and this is what I was feeling. It's essentially like a more mature, slightly more self-controlled version of like my kids' fights, of just like, he said this and he was doing this. Is like, what's happening is like, you want the other person to change and acknowledge your best of intentions. But both of you want that to happen, and it's irresolvable. It's completely irresolvable. And so in that moment, I was just like, I seriously felt paralyzed. And I was just like, it got to the point because I just like drug out. And I was just like, I don't know what. And it's like one of those things of like, really, if you're analyzing it from the objectivist viewpoint, it's just like, this shit doesn't matter. But it does matter. Like, it matters infinitely. And so in that moment, I'm just thinking like, what I'm trying to do, this is the stuff I talk about, right? I want to not insist on my own way. So what I really feel like in that moment is I want to be, like Julian said, and I had a live stream about, I want to be seen and held. I want my wife to say like, and I almost like, this is the magic. Like, I almost came to tears sometimes, which rarely happens to me in conflicts because I just get mad. It's a gift I think it's a gift to be able to, I don't know, cry in those situations, although there's weird ways you can manipulate it, but I'm not capable of that kind of manipulation. Excuse me. And I just said, okay, like, I want to not insist on my own way here. I want to not insist that she sees me and hears me, and I want to acknowledge what she said and acknowledge all the points she's making, because this is love. Me and my wife have very similar values, but we're very different people. And that is the tension. Chezi, if you're still here, like, I've been wanting to ask you this because I keep talking to my wife about this and mentioning you. In the Hebrew, it's Eve is the helpmeet, right? But I've heard you talk about this in ways that are much better than I'm doing it right now, and I can't remember the language. So this was a situation that was just like, most people have these situations in their life, and you could think of, everyone who's in here could think of much more serious, like, examples, like the death of a child, to be extreme, or something. And it's just like, even in that moment, and forgive me if this has happened to you, or whatever tragedies have befallen you, and you could say like, God is teaching me in this moment. I think to avoid suffering is to avoid your own person making. It's to avoid you from becoming who you are. I think it's anti-Christian in the most fundamental way to avoid suffering. I truly do. I think the voluntary acceptance of suffering, of your own Gethsemane, of your own take up my cross and follow me, of your own becoming, that is your person making. Behold the Son of God, the centurion at the cross, Maximus. Jesus is creating the world from the cross. Like, those are the same event. The tree of life is the cross. This is a very orthodox perspective, I think. But in this moment, that's not some airy-fairy thinky-talky thing. How do I die to myself? What is the white martyrdom? And I was telling my wife this. It's the distinction between white martyrdom and red martyrdom. I'm just like, right now, what this tension and this conflict with you feels like death to me. I'd rather die. Like, I'd rather you are the Grand Inquisitor and telling me to deny Christ, and I'd just be like, screw you. I'm not doing that. Silence. Like, it's the easy. Shusaku Endo says this of silence. It's the glory of the red martyrdom. But part of that can be egoic. This is the thing. It's just like, I want the easy way out. Yeah, just kill me. That seems ridiculous to somebody who's not a romantic, but to somebody like me, it's just like, no, the day in and day out forgiveness and suffering and not thinking of yourself more highly than you ought and loving other people amidst their failures and not just playing these subtle pride games of comparing yourself to others and whether or not you're right or they're right, that kind of bullshit antichrist Prince of Lies game is incredibly hard. Okay, that's one illustration. I've been talking a long time. I want to open this up. Yeah. So help against me. What a great way to say it. God bless you, Jews. Opponent processing. Yes. And then I want to go back through comments. The other illustration is that, so my son just got his driver's license. And there's and my in-laws, God bless them, very generous people. They bequeathed us a car from the farm, and just for my family to use. And it was this very generous, great gift. It's a huge blessing. And there's I often think of life as a choose your own adventure. There's all these paths. Again, there are no solutions. There are only trade-offs. And Little Big talks about this a lot. There really are no right answers. I mean, there is and there is not a right answer. The right answer is whatever is your life lived well. That's the right answer, I think, is the truth. Or like Loris says, in the end, Loris at the end of his life realized there was only one true path, one path. But in the moment, as you're thinking about these things and you're processing this and you're trying to make decisions, sometimes you can see a myriad of paths, and to know which one is right is kind of impossible, right? Chinese farmer, we'll see. So, pause. Sorry, that's obnoxious. Sorry, not sorry. I meant to do that. It's intentional. My proclivity, having grown up pretty poor, single wide trailer, sharing bathwater, not having food, needing to essentially saving pennies, saving used nails, that kind of level of poverty, not living on welfare because my parents were kind of opposed to that. I'm sure we would have qualified for a lot of my childhood. My dad hunting, butchering deer on my kitchen table, like that sort of thing. Gardening for food. I grew up very work hard. When you're poor, it's somewhat the freedom of having no choice. Is it's just this kind of choice of do we give our son a car for him to use? And do we pay for his insurance and it needs new tires? And do we do some of that kind of stuff? Or do we just say, you don't get any of that stuff until you've self-disciplined and trained yourself and saved the money and gone through all the steps where you've bought your own car, you've paid for your own insurance, you've blah, 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 blah. And then you've learned through the living, through the embodiment. This is all tied to AI too. You have the kind of knowledge through the suffering of becoming to have the kind of responsibility to take care of a car. Or can we just give you a car? And then the danger of that, that can be a blessing. It's like a mini winning the lottery. But what often happens to lottery winners is it wrecks their life. They end up worse than before they won the lottery. It's just it's a miracle or a curse. And so I often wonder this with my son, because he's similar to me in a lot of ways. And I think my parents helped me in a lot of ways, but they also didn't in a lot of ways because they couldn't. And my dad was he was a austere and strict and kind of more disciplinarian guy of just toughen up. The world is hard and, there has no choice. Learn to work hard. And I'm very thankful for that from my father. That was a blessing. And at the time I wasn't thankful. I didn't really like it. And so with my son, we don't know the future. What is going to be a blessing for him? I don't know. What is the path? I don't know. I have tons of anxieties and fears about my kids' futures and how to parent them well. And I feel a huge weight of responsibility in that. And part of that is probably, I really want to learn. There's a line, and I often talk to my wife about this from, I think I have it saved on my phone because I think I took a picture of it the other day. And I think I have it in a loved album where it's, yes, I have it. This is probably my favorite passage from Graham Greene's The Power and the Glory. One of my favorite books. Dude, yeah, Emily, I have like mom anxiety. It's terrible. Like this is, I don't know, it's horrible. So this quote just wrecks me. I don't know. I hope it will translate. I hope you'll feel the weight of what Graham Greene is saying here. So there's this Captain Fellows, and he has this daughter in the beginning of the book. They're not the main characters, but it's about this relationship of a father with his daughter, and it's so good. And so the context of it, I'll explain it after I read it. But it's I gave him my word, and it's a quote, which there's no context for that. Sorry, I gave him my word, and then this is talking about the daughter of Captain Fellows. She was inflexible as the lieutenant, small and black and out of place among the banana groves. Her candor made allowances for nobody. The future, full of promises, anxieties, and shame, lay outside. The gate was closed, which would one day let it in. But at any moment now, a word, a gesture, the most trivial act might be her sesame. To what? Captain Fellows was touched with fear. He was aware of an inordinate love. It robbed him of authority. You cannot control what you love. You watch it driving recklessly towards the broken bridge, the torn-up track, the horror of 70 years ahead. He closed his eyes. He was a happy man and hummed a tune. Sorry, I feel like it's ridiculous to cry on a live stream. That sometimes I should know myself better than this because there's certain things. It's kind of like scenes from a hidden life. Sometimes when I'm really moved by stuff, I'll try to recount it to my wife, and then I just end up just like on the ground, ugly crying, and I can't talk. And I should know this about myself. I didn't really think this was going to make me cry. See, this is the thing about good books, too. I'm going to try to keep talking. Because like that passage, this is what I mean back to like my gold detector and Sherry read Little Big, because like when I read The Power and the Glory for the first time, I was just like, this book is good and it matters and it's wonderful and people should read it. And I don't want to make like, and I know that's not true in an absolutizing way because different people are different. Like this is the thing. If I start coming out of it and I start talking abstractly about things, emotions die down. This is where you know when you're in the money. Tears are like, when I'm crying, like I know I'm where I'm supposed to be. Like if I were truly a saint, if I were my Whitestone name, I think my gift I would cry perpetually, I think. And I know that's true because that about makes me cry. Good grief, I'm here by myself. The only person that maybe cries more than me in this little corner is Jess. We're just a bunch of sobby men. And I love that dude because like when that happens, I relate to that guy so much when he cries. I'm a very cry person. It's one of my favorite things about my dad too. Is like this really tough guy, bravado, Marlboro man, but he's a crier. He's a deep lover. So that quote is just like, I don't know if I should go back and read it more, but it's just like he's seeing his daughter in her youth and her vigor, her passions, her not knowing the future. He's seeing all this stuff in its like full potency, not knowing the details of her life. That's why he says, he watched it driving recklessly towards the broken bridge, the torn up track, the horror of 70 years ahead, all the suffering she's going to undergo. And it's that line, you cannot control what you love. You really can't. And he closed his eyes. He was a happy man, and he hummed a tune. That's like a prayer for my life. I want to be there. That's the cure for anxiety. That's the cure for nihilism. That's the cure for, like, no matter what you're handed, no matter what you're gifted, if all of life is a gift, is a grace, even the things that you don't want, I think if you receive it appropriately and well, that is who you really are. I think that's Christ in me. I think that's what it means to be the divine spark, what you're supposed to be to the world. So I should open this up. All that to say is, like, I don't know what to do for my son. I've tried to foster him in ways where I think he's gifted, and it's just, and very often I don't think he wants to go down the path I want him to go down, and I guess that's fine, but then it's just like I don't know. That's one of the ways I've tried to be different than my parents. I've tried to discern the gifts in my kids and not. So my dad taught me how he gave me his gifts, which were to work hard with his hands, which, like, that's not me. I mean, like, look at these live streams. I know how to do that now because my dad, like, just essentially beat it into me figuratively. That's not like, this is what I care about. My dad wasn't just like, you should go, I think you're really good with language and thinking and philosophy, and I think you should really go down that path. And, like, I want to find people who you can relate to in that and, like, foster that. Like, my dad didn't do that. I'm trying to do that with my son, but, like, he's not responding to it. So what do you do? I don't know. You cannot control what you love. All right. Good grief. Did I put this stream link then? There, I put it in. I'm going to go back and read some comments. Let's see. Yes, it is absolutely gifts all the way down. I think that's true. And a gift, that's the thing, Tayo, right? Receive it as gift, and it's a gift. What are you teaching me? It's instead of staying in that egoic place of, like, I don't want this, and fighting against it, bucking against the goads. If you receive whatever you're given as a gift, it is a gift. This is the hard problem of all consciousness and all perception. Your orientation and response and acting to the world, the way that you present yourself to the world is the synergy. It's half of the relationship of reality. So, like, if you receive everything as gift, it is a gift. Man, I fear for my sons. I fear my son is my oldest. I fear for my daughters as well, but they just have, all your kids have different strengths, weaknesses, giftings, propensities, in ways, to be blessed is to be cursed as well. My son has, like, there's this line from Loris where Christoph, the grandfather, says of his son, like, he talks about the writer, and he says the writer's imagination should be as wide as the world. It's kind of a very McDonald, kind of a little big idea. The creative sees broadly and has an imagination, is interested in everything. But, like, that's also a curse, because then you don't know how to embody. You don't know how to manifest in the world. What do you do with creativity if you're interested in everything? You have to focus that. You have to focus and have structure to do anything. And that's hard, man. Lance, what's up, my buddy?
What a morning, Luke.
You want to just come in here and cry?
Hey, Jess, right? This is the good stuff.
Oh, jeez. Oh, there we go. I gotta silence this. That's my wife she wants tater tot casserole. Think I could make that happen?
Just throw hot dish. You're in the land of hot dish. Just throw some hot dish together, Luke.
Just manifest it. Just Minnesota, Wisconsin. Hot dish, casserole. Is it hot dish or is it casserole? You know, that's one of those debates. One of the great Minnesota, Wisconsin debates. All right. Yeah, Anselman, I agree with you. Pray, 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 pray. That's good, man. Good advice.
You know, one of the things when you're talking about, so my sons are in their 20s now, and we have my stepson is 18, and there was a little kerfuffle with his grandma. Thinks he needs to get his hair cut, and we're like, we're not going to tell him to get his hair cut. Like, it's getting a bit ridiculous. You know, he probably should, even if he wants to grow it out, trim it up a little bit. But it's just like, he's 18. Okay, like he gets to do at that point what he wants. And I think the vision I really have, it's really struck me when it comes to the kids. You do all this pouring in when they're young, but I really have had this thing, like as soon as they hit like 18, and particularly at the college age, like you get to go live your life, man. Hey, you're dead to me. I want all this stuff, and where it's like, go. Like literally, you just like what, like for example, if let's say he wants to become a reformed pastor, you're just like, dude, go. You know what I mean? Seriously,
Oh, that
like,
would be great.
But look, that's the deal, is like you just have to give them up to, you know, you've instilled so much in them, and it's just at that point it really is, of course, you know, and think about yourself in your 20s or whatever. And the other thing is like, particularly at the moments when you really need them to listen to you, do they really listen to you at certain ages? Probably not. You know, but there'll be times you'd step in, but I've really just gotten to this point, and it is that imagery of just at some certain point is you've done what you've done, you've planted the seeds you've seed, you're trying to live the life you want to live, and you just give them up to whatever path they want to go down. They just have to go down it.
You have to, yeah, and that's the thing I've realized so much with my son, because I've like, this is one of the balls that dropped, and then Khezi, I really want to hear what you have to say, is of just the necessity, but also just the utter futility and powerlessness of propositional knowledge. Because like, this is an issue that comes up now with my son with this car all the time, is he'll like, I live he basically lives about 5 blocks, and it's been a really mild Minnesota winter, and walking to school is just a good habit we want to instill in him. And now he has his car, and of course he wants to drive it to school, but I'm just like, but everything about like the whole American landscape built up around the automobile and city architecture and what that has done to our culture. And
the kid just wants to drive a car, Luke.
I know. But then it's also like the cost of stuff. This is like, because you give him the car versus him buying the car, and like insurance on a 16-year-old boy, his insurance for this car is more than me and my wife's insurance for both of our cars. And I'm just thinking, like, you know, we're paying this, we're going to get you new tires, but like, that's a significant cost. And I'm just like, but here's the thing. If I can tell you all this, but like, until you feel the weight of paying for all that yourself, like, it's meaningless. Like, you say, okay, sure, the insurance costs a lot, the whatever, but like, until you actually do that and you stop like door dashing with your excess money that you don't have very much of, like, to me and my wife say this, we're just like, we never DoorDash. It's like, what a ridiculous use of money, you know.
Exactly.
But it just like makes no sense to him. But of course, like me telling him that, like, impotent.
Right. But there are ways to instill that on a smaller scale, which is like, I always had to, well, kick it, but I was working in the rural areas. You know this. We were working when we were 13, Luke, in rural areas, right? But he has to pay for all of his own gas, right?
Yeah.
But hey, you're going to have to pay for you find ways that, you know, so you're going to mow lawns, or I don't know what you're going to have to do, but if you wanted to run around, you want to go to a movie, you got to pay for your own movie. You know, all that stuff, you just make them pay for things. You know what I mean? So on a micro scale, you make them feel it.
Yeah, we're trying. That's what we're trying to do. Thankfully, my wife is more realistic and reasonable and structured with it, because I would want to just go hard line and I'd make him rebellious and hate me. That's the Thompson way of parenting. Anyhow, Khezi, Timmy, what up?
Hey, thank God, doing well. First off, I appreciate you being so vulnerable and I think it's beautiful. And
Not a choice. It's ridiculous.
it's all good. I mean, it's a choice to do the live stream, right? But I'm a crier as well, and I think a good cry is beautiful. I posted this verse from Genesis about leaving your father's house and
Yes.
cleaving to your wife. So, I
Uh,
mean, already in Genesis, like it's sort of built in. This is before we hit up any other stories, right? With this before Pharaoh, this is before the Exodus, before all the heavy hitters. We're just being told off the bat, this is the reality. And there's something about wanting to move ourselves from being created to being creators. And while
Yeah.
he's in the house, ultimately, this is still all my father's game, and I'm a part of it. Right.
Yep.
So he gave me the car. He didn't give me the car. There's new wheels. This is all part of his creation mode. And at some point, now we're not saying leave your father's house and like live in the wilderness, right? Rather, it's leave your father's house and then find that other person that you could create with where you could, and we spoke about opponent processing. We're not saying give up on the challenge and give up on questioning yourself and growing. Just at some point, it can't be done in the house. Now, we obviously have to deal with the culture of, like Lance was alluding to, the 13-year-old boy that's already working, right? And that's very much why in Jewish halacha we have the bar mitzvah at 13, right? You're considered a man right now, and you're going to take on these responsibilities, right? However, interestingly enough, for Noahides that want to take on such a requirement or responsibility, they don't need to do that at 13. And the answer to them is you should see where your culture's at and do so when you really feel like your child's an adult. Unfortunately, in the States today, that's something like 24 years old, right? Like where you're so then before I'm going to ask him to stand in front of the master of the universe and take on all these things, can I ask a 24-year-old to do that? And this is always difficult, like you said. And my kids are younger, obviously. And both you have more experience with me about this, but so difficult to pass on wisdom, right? It would be so much easier if they just like, trust me, man. Like this is, and I find myself telling this to my son. Remember when I told you to, that you're going to enjoy this movie and you said, no, and then you watched it and then you were laughing the whole time. So this other piece of advice is the same thing. Just trust me now. And they can't, and they love you and they want you, but and there's a sense of us, we need to be able to let go. And I'm sorry that I'm jumping to the Bible about this, but again, with just like Esau and Jacob, we learned that, and the Midrash tells us that they were seemingly educated the same way, but that was a mistake, right? And one needed a completely different outlet. And obviously we are sensitive to this in 2024, and we want our kids to be able to feel like they are they're all winners and participation medals. But to the beautiful book of Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianov of The Coddling of the American Mind, right? You see that the whole culture is trying to do this, and more than that, you're asking right now, should I cover all my son's expenses for his car? And on the flip side, you're reading a book where parents are looking to send their kids to places where they're not watched, where the kid could scrape his leg, where the kid could get hurt. So I wouldn't necessarily, obviously, you don't want the car like stopping in the middle of the road, even though that's its own experience. I don't know if you need to necessarily jump into that and start investing into that. There's something about allowing him to experience difficulty within a protected and safe zone, so to speak, right? Because that's where it's going to happen. You want to give your kid, at some point when your son is 25 or 35, he's going to realize, the coin's going to drop, and he's going to realize, okay, this is what my dad meant, or this is what I learned from those cars, or he's going to be on a live stream or whatever the medium is then, bawling and saying, I remember my father gave me the shittiest car, but now in retrospect, I realize. And what we need to do sometime is, and this is what you were crying about, that guy saying, now my daughter is driving on the broken bridge, and I'm seeing the next 70 years ahead, right? And he's weeping. But I would say we should take an advance of our future self. Why weeping? Why is he not celebrating? Why is she not 7 years old and the most amazing mother, or she's the president, or whatever it is how we decide to look at this? I choose to believe that the toolkit my father gave me, and I'm trying to constantly refine it, obviously, I could look back and say I'm happy with that, Dad. Like,
Yeah.
thank you. And I want to believe that the toolkit I'm giving my son, with all his faults, he will be happy with that eventually. And I look at it that way. So I see him driving down the bridge, and I have a smile on my face. I'm not crying.
Yeah, well, so that is the quote. It says, you know, you cannot control what you love. You watch it driving recklessly toward the broken bridge, the torn up track, the horror of 70 years ahead. So just like life, when he closed his eyes, he was a happy man and hummed a tune. Like, he is happy with that. Just knowing the suffering is inevitable.
But closing of the eyes, I think, is key over there.
Mm.
Because at some point we have to shield ourselves from looking at it all the time. Because we have to allow ourselves to look into the future and imagine and explore. Because otherwise, you know, it's not going to be possible. It's too much of a heavy load to take on. Like, you know, like what's going to be with your daughter's boyfriends? What's going to be with their in-laws? Like the questions are endless.
Right. And the one thing, and then I want to hear what you have to say, Tim, but like, temperament is such a big thing with that, because my parents both, and the way that I'm wired, and it's a kind of an Enneagram 4 thing, is like, it's parenting via fear. Like, both of my parents were, in their own particular ways, were just like, these are all the ways life could go wrong. These are all the ways life will go wrong. And we are parenting against all these bad potentialities and outcomes. And so it was all very fear-based parenting. My mom in regards to like Christian morality, and my dad in a very practical way of like, life's hard, red in tooth and claw. Like, you got to work hard, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, like be able to physically work harder than anybody else. Like, that was my dad's goal in life. And so then me, like, those things are deeply seated and baked into who I am as a person. And so then I come with my son, and I very much can see, even though like I'm an optimist in the very big picture, I mean, good grief, I'm a universalist, but, and I think all will be well. And I'm a romantic in that sense. In the very like practical day-to-day stuff, I'm very like fear oriented, and I see potential negative outcomes and what could be wrong. And I want to like guard from those things. And so it's just but that's just a temperament thing. Like, that's not reality. And I have to just be aware of that. Anyhow, Tim.
I'm going to be honest. Like, I only started, like, I was listening, but I wasn't paying attention until you started crying. And then I was like, what is he reading? So I'm lost. But I do have an appreciation for like how crying or weeping, like, it feels like you're falling into like a slipstream that like you normally don't have access to. You know what I mean? And you can like sort of choose to exit that slipstream or remain in it.
When you're crying, when one's crying?
Yeah, when you're weeping.
No, I agree. I mean, I think I just kind of experienced that. There's like, part of it was, I don't know how much I was conscious of this, but like, I can't, like, I suppose I could have just continued to focus on that and feel those feels, and then just like actively weep for about a half hour on a live stream and not be able to speak. but I chose to like, to pull out of it and go more into the abstract, where I could like say words. I don't know what the people want more. What's more useful? You want the tears, obviously, because you were just like listening to me as like background white noise until I started crying.
Going on and on about some piece of literature I'm never going to read.
Yeah. I mean, it's all right. That's fine, man. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to illustrate through the practical illustrations, which you can go back and listen to if you want or not. You clearly are not going to, Tim. But the sink and the tension and the conflict with my wife, that illustration, and then also like the practical illustration of my son beginning to drive and having his driver's license, and then that Graham Greene quote from The Power and the Glory just flowed into parenting. That like all of these things, the hard problem of all perception, and what is the right path, and the Chinese farmer, and all these esoteric out there ideas that we talk about all the time, are very practical. This is like where my wife will say like, okay, let's get practical. Let's get practical. And like, I realize you have to come down out of the clouds to live, but like those, I don't know. I guess that's just what I'm trying to illustrate and stress is that this stuff to me isn't just like thinky talky nonsense that doesn't matter for your daily life. It very much matters. It's just like you have to, I think some people just don't. There are the people, I guess, that just stay in the thinky talky, and it's divorce. This is kind of what I mean, probably by divided man. It's like divorce from their real life. So they just sit up here and have intellectual conversations all the time and don't try to apply it and live it, which to me that seems dumb. And then there are the people who don't think about the stuff at a high level at all, and they just live in an unconscious way. And somewhat that's fine, you know, like that's kind of the 90-year-old grandma in the pew at your church or your synagogue or whatever, who like maybe doesn't think about all, you know, she's, you know, they're not thinking about the Symbolic World Summit and Jordan Hall and, you know, and like how does Kabbalah relate to mystical Christianity? You know, like they don't care about any of that stuff. But if they're living a beautiful life, it doesn't matter, you know, but they can be related.
I would say not only can they be related, they have to be related. I mean, this is part of the embodied life, and this is also part of like what I hope and what I think TLC is also aiming at. Whether that's well, we can't say it's consciously, but subconsciously that's happening. Where the idea is to remember embody, right? Like with taking the thinky talky and then taking it to the streets, so to speak. And while my tradition is very much very deep into that, into, you know, from the moment you wake up, right, what shoe are you going to be putting on, and have that intentionality to it. Nevertheless, it's really all about ultimately how is that being manifested in the world. And you know, you crying specifically about well, not what you were talking about when I'm talking to my wife and like we're having an argument, like I want to just die, right? That is where,
Dude, that's what I tell her. I'm just like, what this feels like to me is like, I tell her, and I'm not even, this isn't hyperbole. It's just like, I'd rather be stabbed. Like, I'd rather we be knife fighting right now. And to her, she's just like, that's ridiculous because I'm like the stereotypically female emotional one, and she's less so in different ways. My wife and I are complex weirdos, but it's so horrible. I hate it so much.
I know, but it's so beautiful because
Yes.
I mean, I put this other verse on from Song of Songs about you know, arrows of fire and how intense fire is, and how intense love is as well, where you know, we're asking God to put us like a seal on his arm. And there's a sense where I'm asking for all of it, right? I'm asking to walk on the coals, and if for the uninitiated or someone that's not ready for it is going to burn. But there's things that feel so alive about participating in such an intense emotional and embodied relationship. And I would want, in a certain sense, that's what I would expect from someone who's feeling like there's a disconnect or feels like that this unit is fracturing. And that doesn't have to mean like fracturing, like it's going down a bad path, but even in this specific moment, in this specific argument, we're not simpatico, we're not seeing each other. And part of the help against me is for her and you both to accommodate a space where you can break down. And we always speak about this, or we have spoken about this, about how how people come into a relationship thinking it's about the 50-50, right? And it's not about the 50-50, it's about the 90-10. I could only give you 10% right now. I need you to be the other 90 for me. And right now you're crying right now, and I need you to understand and see me where I am. And there's something about being so vulnerable in front of your wife, and hopefully, and I would assume, presumably, that I know you're saying she sees it as crazy, but she also sees how much emotion and how much love this person has for me right now, that he's breaking down crying right now. And like you said, there's a thin line over there where one has to be careful about not abusing that, right? One doesn't want to pull a yank on those chains, but when it's happening naturally, that is the deepest of the deep. And sometimes you're not necessarily going to get an answer. And the answer is not whether you disagree with me or not, but the fact that we got to a point where I couldn't fully anticipate or understand you, and you couldn't fully anticipate or understand me. That's what I'm crying about. I'm crying about because you and I are that union. And I decided to walk out of my father's house and connect to you, and then with you create new life. And even here, there's an issue. And that's terrifying because it's not going to get closer than that. And even if there's an issue, what does that mean about my relationship with my children, with my community, with me and myself? So I look at those moments as terrifying, but beautiful.
Yeah, well, it's for me, like this last conflict tension was one of the only times, man, I seriously could count on one hand. It's probably only been 2 or 3 times where in a conflict I've cried, because I don't cry. I wish I could. I'm much too angry of a person, honestly, and it really has to do, I mean, it has to do with, I think, refining fire and pride and ego, because I mean, anger is ego. And I wish I could get at that place, because truly, when you are, what happened for me, the magic that happened, and I guess somewhat it's the gift of tears in the conflict, was when I said, like, when I stopped insisting that she see my intentions and not judge me for like intentions of like not being considerate of when I started doing the project and all that. Like, that's where I wanted to stay, was in that spot of like, acknowledge this, see this, please. Like, don't misjudge me. Or as Sherry, Sherry shared with me some video, like, don't help me not be misunderstood or something, some old song. What is that, Sherry? Anyhow, that's a huge thing for me. Like, I don't want to be misunderstood, but all of that is just like some fear-based insecurity. It's still ego. It's just a fear-based insecurity thing. When I got to the place of just being like, what I really want, and this is a hard thing to do, I think, in tension and conflict, because you really do have to drop all your walls. And that's where the magic comes in, is like, what I said really to my wife is, I was like, what I really most wanted out of this, and I think this was true, because I think the tears for me are often they're like a pointer to like, okay, you're in a true spot, is I wanted to fix this sink and have you and make you happy. Like, that was truly what I wanted at the most, was to make you happy. And just for you to just be like surprised and like, and just like, yay, it's just like, it's that motif and just idea throughout great literature and history and all the great stories of like the hero, the knight, like he just wants the approval of the maiden, the princess. Like, that's the power of the feminine. I mean, it truly is unbelievable. And I like say that to my wife, and she's like, I just almost find that hard to believe. And I'm just like, well, it's real. Like, no matter how pissed off I seem, it's basically just because I feel like you're not happy with me. That's like pretty much it.
Let's have an argument. Hezi, I had a question for you about something you said at some point in the past. I can't remember. It was probably in the last month or two. You were describing like the prayers that Jewish children are taught to pray every morning. And I can't remember if it was the men or the women, but you said that like one of them are explicitly taught to pray like consciously, thank you for making me Jewish, to God. And it struck me because like there's sort of an insidious like ethno-supremacy baked into that, and I just wanted to know what your thoughts was on that.
Okay, so first of all, thank you for the question. We did discuss this, I think, like a month ago or so. I started off, just for some context, I started off by saying I was more focused on the blessing of thank you for not men say thank you for making me a man, and women say thank you for not making me, thank you for making me as you willed. And I was talking about how my son, we just use the same for both men and women, just thank you for making me as you willed. There are interpretations, and I'll get to your point, but there are interpretations about the fact that women are women are in a certain sense at a higher level than us and are sort of already in that next stage, heaven-like reality, which is part of the frustration they find in men, and that's why they're constantly looking to evolve. And men, in a certain way, in a lower level, are sort of more completed, and that's why they're making that blessing. But that's just, apologetics potentially, but there's some deep meaning there. Specifically about what you said about it, and there's a list of other blessings you say there as well. For not being captive, you thank for God for the rooster for recognizing day and night. So it's for helping the poor, releasing the captive. So it's many different blessings. The one that's focused on Jews, when you look at it being like sort of there's a racist element to it. I cannot deny that I see the Jewish people as the chosen people, but as I said many times before, and that point is just to recognize our lot in life and be grateful for it. That in no way means that Jews are genetically better, that Jews are intellectually better, that Jews are physically better, that Jews have that an individual Jew has a stronger relationship with God than an individual Christian. It's more about the fact of being and Luke and I have spoken about this a little, about the difference of redemption of the community and redemption of the individual, and how while other religions like Islam and Christianity offer redemption for the individual, Judaism is offering redemption also for the collective. And there's a sense where just like I am not a priest, and there is a Israelite that isn't a Levite, so too there are levels to these things, again, with regards to the whole. So I would say, again, and to quote Maimonides, that any individual, and it doesn't matter if to be from any priestly class or any individual in the world that wants to get close to God and participate in that relationship, is welcome to do so. He's welcome to stand beside me at the temple, and I don't see him in any way as less than, or that his relationship is not as pure. The only point is I am thankful for my tradition. I am thankful for my tradition that has lasted this long and has allowed me, hopefully, to maintain a very clear signal and very clear traditions to how to connect to God and to the divine. And that is ultimately what I believe Judaism's universal message is, to offer that to the whole entire world. And at that point, as I mentioned often ad nauseum, we are all supposed to be standing at the temple speaking in pure speech. And at that point, it's Jew, Gentile, male, and female. So I would say that's my answer. And I'm sorry if it was long-winded.
Okay. Thank you for answering.
Did that make you more upset, though? Or?
No, I wasn't upset. I was upset by like some of the implications that my own mind created. Because like ever since I was a kid, I've been very sensitive to exclusivity. I was excluded from some sort of like important things as a child, and like I watched upon them as afar, like from afar, and I became very sensitive to things that like categorize, especially people, based on sort of characteristics that they can't control, right? Like in fashion, a supermodel is a 0.001 genetic aberration that has a long neck and long body and perfectly symmetrical face and all that, right? So like people that don't look like that are excluded from that. And I've always I had a lot of Jewish friends when I was growing up. I went to a public school for middle school and high school, and I was really struck by how the Jewish kids treated this one Messianic Jew at my high school, and they hated him. The most hatred that I've ever seen, like in person, was like towards this Messianic Jew from the, let's say, the ethnically pure Jewish kids. And like now in the news with this Israel crisis, right? I've been doing a lot of research and doing a lot of thinking, and like it does appear that like whether it's an institution or a community or whatever, if there's some prevailing idea that like by blood we're intrinsically better, like not necessarily genetically, it's just like our bloodline is pure and you know we want to keep it that way, like it's going to dissolve the foundations of resolving any sort of conflict between like another homogenous group of people. Do you get what I'm saying?
I totally get what you're saying. Very deep stuff. I want to just confirm with Luke that it's okay that we continue on this route for a second.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so oh boy. Okay.
And if my questions are offensive or
no,
like
not
ignorant,
at all. They're
then
not,
I apologize.
They're not offensive at all, and this is very much you know, brave space TLC kind of conversation that we want to have over here, and it's very much necessary. Just trying to think where to start.
Here you go. Tayo has this question: is the Messianic Jew the Jewish Uncle Tom?
So I'm saying the Messianic Jew and the hatred for him. You have to. I'll take it. Let's go all the way back. And the nations of the world, of the earth, will be blessed through you. That's the blessing to Abraham, right? It's not the Jews, it's not the Arabs, it's everyone through you. Then there is something like a 2,000-year exile that we go into, and that changes a lot of things for Judaism, right? Focus a lot more on the code, the halakha, what can building an exoskeleton of exile that could keep us safe, stay away from the other. And that led us to, in a certain sense, forget that universal mission. And many of, let's say, the sources or rabbis that I would point to that are seemingly more progressive, they were forgotten or washed over or not really discussed. So your grievances have some place. I would say specifically with the Messianic Jew, there's something about someone coming into my space or telling me I need to change and I need to just accept Christ ultimately. So you could understand how someone feels, has some issues with that. And obviously Judaism doesn't go around proselytizing. That's not our mission. We believe that that's something that happens eventually over time. It's true that the Noahide movement recently, because we are in our land and because we feel more confident and because we could begin to imagine what this universal age would look like, then this conversation starts again. Part of this conversation starting and why the rubber hits the road right away is built into the conflict going on in Israel is the fact that the Jewish people seemingly are back in their homeland. However, there's nothing more biblical than Hebron, right? Where the tomb of the patriarchs is. And the other thing that the Bible talks about nonstop is the foreigner living in your land and how you have to respect him and love him and take care of him. And here you have this clash where you have like, I have these people over here, some of them in.
Oh no.
Well, I don't know, Yosef would know the stats better than me. Some of them that are potentially even genetically Jewish, historically. And we have to try to find a language where I could speak to them. So all the language you hear about, getting rid of the Palestinian people and ethnic cleansing, and we could discuss this more in length. This is all gobbledygook. We love, at least I and many that I know in my circles, I love my Arab cousin. I cannot wait for him to return into the tent of Abraham. And we, of course, have to learn how to have a joint conversation. I could share and not give so much information just because it's kept private right now. I am in a group of different spiritual leaders and rabbis in the Jewish community that we're having discussions, which are closed because we have to realize some of it is controversial to speak about now. How do we create a language where I could speak to the Sufi, I could speak to the Arab, I could tell him I can see Muhammad as a prophet, and I have sages and I have sources that could affirm that. How do I take the concept of Hephzibah in the book of Zerubbabel being the mother of Messiah, and what does that mean towards Mary? These are different aspects that Judaism didn't want to discuss, because most of their time they were dealing with, how do I survive? How do I make it to the next year? Now, slowly but surely, we could start removing these peels and start having our more universal conversation. So does our tradition have things that would seem unseemly and seem problematic? Yes, like all of them do. However, I choose to focus on what I believe to be the undergirding pillars of our tradition, and in that, it's it's Isaac and Ishmael walking together. It's Jacob and Esau hugging, and I believe that is where we're going to go. But we required a space and time where someone like you, Tim, feels very comfortable to ask someone like me a question like this, and not feel like there's going to be a third world war and I don't have to worry about that people are going to come out of my house with torches. It's a space where now we could actually speak and reach out to each other. So hopefully that is what's going to happen. And yes, Israel has to figure out how to resolve that conflict.
Yeah, I mean, like, I wanted it from the horse's mouth, which is why I asked you. Not that I'm calling you a horse. Sorry, that's an American expression for
Go to
like
hell,
getting
man. No,
getting it from the source, right? Because like, everybody has an opinion, right? But like, what does the person actually think, right? Whose like business it is to have an opinion on? That's you. And so I'm just trying to become more informed myself. And I find that in this space, like especially Luke has created a place where, and I hate this, but like I'm going to use it to say the quiet part out loud, like to say the thing that you're actually wondering, like the question that you're afraid to ask, So
Listen, I was inspired by Sarah Bareilles. Say what you want to say, man. Let the words fall out.
I'm not going to write you. I'm not going to write you a love song.
Oh man, you're so.
First of all, that was very good, Tim. Is it say what you want to say? Or say what you mean to say.
Say what you want to say. Say what you want to say.
So what's that other song? Oh yeah, that's true. That's true. So what's say what you mean to say? That's someone else.
Oh, I do know that one too.
Just three middle-aged men talking about Sarah Bareilles.
Dude, I love my I don't know, I have eclectic music taste, but some of my favorite music are female girl bands and stuff. Like I love the Staves. I love and here I won't be able to list any because I'm really just virtue signaling. There's
Evanescence.
Luke, sorry.
Evanescence I love too. Anyhow.
I'll catch you guys later.
See you, dude.
Thanks for talking.
Tim, let's you and I just talk about Jews now.
Okay. So I'm not an anti-Semite, but I wouldn't call myself a pro-Semite either.
Yeah. Say more.
It's just kind of like you got to earn it,
Yeah, that's right.
And I didn't have no birthright. I didn't have no bar mitzvah, right? It was crazy as a kid, like going to bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs and like seeing these kids get like thousands of dollars in cash. And like when I was growing up, like my reward for finishing my chores was a stick of gum. And it was like it did create this like really, I don't know if it's a resentment or like a just emotional scar tissue, but it was like, you're not a part of our cool club, and you're never gonna be. And that kind of bummed me out because like thousands of dollars was crazy to see when you're a kid, or like these like super elaborate parties, like I remember like I had a birthday party. I was lucky to get presents, right, from like my friends, and one of my friends gave me like an Army Man set with guns, like little plastic guns in it. My parents took it and threw it away, like right after I unwrapped it.
That's right. That's right. I'm with your parents. There was, do you? So I think I'm older than you. I don't know how old you are, but
I'm
do you
35.
know? Huh?
35.
Okay, 41. So do you know what a Teddy Ruxpin is?
No.
Okay, so it was like in the mid to late 80s. It was this. So it was a teddy bear, but you could put, it was like one of the first robotic kind of speaking teddy bears. You could put tapes that had a tape deck player in the back of it. And you could put tapes in it. So it was like this speaking bear. And I wanted one so bad, but this is back in the days when I was like, we were really poor. By the time I was in high school, my my dad had worked where we were kind of more middle class, but and I can't remember who got me the Teddy Ruxpin, if it was my grandparents who were a little bit more well off. And my dad was just like, nope. Like we had to, he made him take it back. He was just like, no way, you are not getting this Teddy Ruxpin and like going to be happy. I remember just being so just devastated and sad.
Terrible.
It was just awesome. But like, that's the thing. Like, it's really, again, like all is gift, really. It's kind of like what I was saying earlier. If your orientation of that, and even if it's not like in the big picture, because now, I mean, I don't know. I don't think that I have deeply held resentments against that. Like I've lived enough life and seen and been a father myself and worked through some of those things. And I think I've seen positively what my dad was trying to do and all that stuff. And it's fine. But like in the moment, it was devastating. It was terrible.
Yeah, but like my parents didn't give me everything, right? And like the things that I did have were so much more precious to me than like the friend. I remember I had a friend and they had a room in their house that was just a toy room, right?
Yeah.
Like there were just toys everywhere. Like almost you had to like spread a path through the toys, right?
Yeah.
And every toy you could ever want, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like those kids didn't care.
Yeah.
Like, and so like my one Transformer, right? Or my like what was another toy? I had a bunch of like Star Wars figurines. My Millennium Falcon, dude. Shit. I still have my Han Solo pistol.
Yeah, I mean, when you don't have that much stuff, somebody was saying that recently on some stream. I can't remember who it was, or it was someone on YouTube, I'm pretty sure, but they were saying, growing up relatively poor and at Christmas they would get like one gift. It was their toy for the year, but it was such a big deal and they loved it so much. But then now when you have a Christmas where it's just like ripping through package after package after package and you like have immediately forgot, you don't really value stuff that much. But anyhow, Matt, what's up? Good to see you. So I think I've only ever interacted with you via text.
Yeah, I may have been on a rando-ish stream before with you, but I think it was mostly ships passing in the night. So good to share face with you and voice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I got excited when the Judaism question came up.
Ooh, we can go back there. Emily's talking about it too. It'd be great for Emily to talk about because she has like a really unique perspective on this, obviously. But anyhow, yeah, let's do it. Let's go back into it.
I'm gonna
pro or anti-Jew first.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
No, well, it's so part of I guess part of this brave space is bravely speaking on behalf of other people in your ignorance, which is what I'm about to do. Like I tend to think like the infant baptism thing is a really helpful way for Tim. Are you Christian? Do you think of yourself as a Christian? I don't know your background.
Uh-oh.
I don't identify as a Christian
Read the fifth.
publicly.
That's helpful. I didn't want to assume.
Yeah.
Well, you
He's
can
like Jordan Peterson. Do you believe in the physical resurrection of the Lord Jesus Christ, Tim?
yeah.
So like I think it was imprinted upon me as a child, like in the same way that like violence can be imprinted on a child, right?
Yeah, word.
And so like
Wow.
it's when you add flour and bake a cookie, you can't take the flour back out. It's become a new structure, right? And so like when I think about my Christianity, it's like the fellowship wandering through the halls of Moria, of like an artifact, a monumental artifact that's upholding, a person, which is me. But like I've many times asked God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, whatever, to enter my heart, to relieve me of pain, to help me. And those prayers are unanswered. And like, they're not going to be answered, right? I can't get my 20s back. And so, until there's some reason for me to believe that like these things are actually true and not metaphorically true, I'm not going to believe it. But I'll stand at the doors of the church and protect those inside.
Wow.
You're a beautiful man, Tim.
I thought we were just gonna have an intellectual conversation, and we're all
can do both. Listen, we are evolved, beautiful men here. We will cry. We will have intellectual conversations. We will be vulnerable. We'll virtually hug. That was great, Tim. Thank you.
Yeah. I can see, Tim, if it's not, tell me how stupid this is, but I sense a correlation between your aversion to exclusion and your personal experience, your personal experience with God that you just described. It sounds, and that's something I can relate to. You don't. Is it too bold to say that you don't want to be left outside the temple and kept out by God or a people who are God's people? I guess you've had a lot of very understandable negative experiences with that kind of exclusionary behavior. Is that fair?
Yeah, I have always found the story of the wedding shirt to be like a horror. Because I often find myself without a shirt.
Yeah, the wedding garment. It was a recent text in the liturgical calendar. I don't know. That's one of those texts that I don't I don't know that I have a good handle on what it means or what's going on there. You're talking about the parable of the wedding feast and the wedding garments, because there's like this weird, if I'm remembering it right, there's this weird thing because there's the people that are invited who don't show up. And so then he sends the servants back out and says, go to the highways and the byways and just gather whoever will come.
Everyone.
Right. And so it's the first off excluded. It's the non-invited people that then are invited. And then those people show up. But then in the party, there are some that are seen to be without the wedding garment, which is like what the dynamics of that are. Because if I remember right, culturally, I think it's traditionally, like a lot of people didn't have nice clothes. And so there was this idea, but it's a celebration. So there's wedding garments. And so then the host would often give wedding garments for people to put on so that everyone was dressed appropriately for the celebration. So
it
then
was
what does it
like
mean?
to adhere to the custom.
Yeah.
Like they had, the custom was that everyone had to be wearing these garments, and there was like, what are we going to do? These people are poor; they don't have any garments. It's like, we'll make them garments. We'll clothe them. And one guy is like, I don't need that. I don't want to wear that shirt. And he's dragged out, right? And I think that's where that phrase of wailing and gnashing of teeth comes from.
Yeah, which is actually a riff on Isaiah, I think. But yeah.
Well, for some reason, my imagination produces an image of what it's like for those outside of the feast better than I can imagine the feast. Almost like...
That's because you've been deeply informed by the outcast, by Christianity.
Yeah, I mean, like, I had an experience. So I was raised in a charismatic Catholic community, very much in the lineage of the Duquesne Pentecost occurrence. And we, like, sort of, what I tell people is, like, we viewed just regular Catholics that, like, just went to mass on Sunday. Those were like muggles to us. Like, we were so deep in this, like, crazy mystical, and incorporating incorporating John Paul II and the theology of the body and, like, all this stuff. And, like, I had this really like painful experience when, like, I became a young man, and I, like, eventually learned that, like, all the guys I knew were all masturbating, like, all the time. And I was like, what fucking liars you all are. Like, even the youth pastor, and eventually you have, like, a private walk with him, and he's like, I struggle with it too. It's like, what the fuck you mean you struggle with it too? Like, you just told me that we're going to burn in hell forever if we even touch that thing the wrong way. Like, what the fuck? You're going to go home and jerk off after this? Like, you guys lied to me, and I'll never forget that. Like, I do not tolerate being lied to.
And I appreciate your honest. We all do appreciate in the chat very much. Clearly appreciates your honesty, your willingness to not lie. Yeah.
Yeah. That's been one of my, what's so hard for me about church trauma, like my idea of talking to people who have religious questions and church trauma, I would just love it. I mean, we do it here, but I would love for that to be a local practice too. I think there's just so many people who have that experience of, it's kind of the idea of the weeds and the tares and Antichrist coming up from among you, because it just really means those who divide, and that's really, like, I think, due to deception and lies. And sometimes the problem is that the people that are doing that, they're self-deceived too. They don't even realize they're deceiving. So, like, there's the intentional deceptions, which people have experienced, but there's also the self-deceptions of people who, like, I think the thing that you're talking about with masturbation and sin, and then putting on the kind of happy Sunday face, and then maybe talking about it in private. But there's a weird, that's kind of what I'm trying to get at when I say the Sunday school answer. You can talk to a lot of religious people who grew up religious or whatever, who will give you, when you're having conversations in the abstract, they'll give you lots of answers to things that I don't think they actually believe. That's what I call the Sunday school answer. And that's why I say, like, there's a difference between thinking one ought to believe something and actually believing it. Actually believing it is a different kind of thing. And I think it's really helpful to have a distinction between those two categories, because there's all sorts of things that I think I'm supposed to believe, but I think that I'm honest enough with myself, and I have the whatever mental and or spiritual capacity to separate those things and see those differences within myself. And that's what allows you, I think, to maybe not completely have integrity, but at least be on the road to integrity.
Yeah. I view integrity like in the way that you would treat the integrity of a ship, right? Like, does it withstand bombardment? Does it thrive under pressure, right? Like,
Yeah.
is it tempered against temperature changes, right? Like I've always appreciated this metaphor in my own mind of how I was made into a man is similar in the way that we make steel currently, is that like I had to be just melted through this like crazy childhood of learning everything all at once, right? And then it cools in the water bath, the hardening bath, right? But like it's too hard. And if it's too hard, it'll become brittle and shatter. And so the blade then needs to be tempered, and it needs to be, and the tempering process is simply a softening to realign the grains of the molecules. And so like I found as a young man that like these experiences that traumatized me hardened me into a person that was rough to be around for a couple years. But I've been trying to soften myself to become like a strong piece of steel. Sorry if I'm talking too much.
No, I think that's good. I think that's a I think that's necessary, but that, and I think that's related to some of the illustrations I was talking about with my wife in the sink and my son in the car. I don't think anyone really knows. I think that's where the integrity and like your ship thing, like how do you know that a ship is really strong? Well, it's got to weather some storms. That's the actual testing of your faith. I think is like, how do you know that you are really strong and anti-fragile and can endure things? It ain't in theory land. It's not in the abstract. It's actually enduring the trials, And I think that's a really great point. I think it's deeply personal, but it's also related to all sorts of stuff like TLC and Christian YouTube. Like where, do you really care about persons and relationships? Or if you were offered in the desert, like take you up to the highest point of the temple and like, I'm going to give you all these things. Do you just, leave behind relationships in TLC for status and fame and the algorithm and subscribers and money and prestige and people looking at you?
Well, that's why I'm here. I'm here to plug my new video, spoon carving.
Right.
Oh, you gotta be poor for Jesus, Tim. Remember.
Well, there's the kind of like that can be like hyper pietism can be a status game too.
Yeah.
So there's deceptions on all sides, and I don't that's why I like a space like this where people can come and just talk and say what they want to say, but it's not a place without challenge or tension either, because that's what that's why I like people pushing back. That's why I like you coming in and throwing a wrench or whatever. That's how you figure stuff out. If everybody's just coming in parroting the same things, I don't know what this means.
I'm not a wrench thrower.
You're a challenger.
Yeah, but I don't like I don't, despite the truth, I need to maintain a certain amount of like delusional view of myself, right? Like I'm not a disruptor. I'm a sandcastle builder.
Can I pick at you just a little bit, Tim? Tell me.
Yeah, I have integrity, so you can pick.
There's an idea. I think a lot of people here can completely relate with your experience, and there's a sense in which we still want to build up that Tower of Babel out of better. We're just looking for better steel, and I like your analogy of it needs to be. You can't make it too brittle. If you rush that process of tempering that steel, it'll be brittle. So you kind of have to massage and care for that steel. That's still a self-help solution, which I would say is not very Jewish. You still at some point you have to give up. You have to give up the thing that is most precious to you. You have to let it die in order to get it back. Which might relate, though I don't have kids, it might relate to parenting as well, and what Luke was talking about earlier. You still, the seed still has to die in the soil to come back as a tree, and that's something that's a lifetime. The orthos around here are great at talking about salvation being a process, like a thing that you do and that you live, that you have your being in. And a lot of that is death, so that you can receive life back. But even if we cling to life in a more mature way than we saw it demonstrated as when we were kids, we're still clinging to life, and so we will lose it still. And that's a very sobering thing that I frankly struggle with, but that seems to be the consistent witness of Scripture. I don't know. So that's my contribution.
I thought you were going to pick at me. If that was you picking at me, I was excited.
Oh no! I'll do one more little thing, and then I'll go. So I don't hog, because you guys you're playing jazz.
Yeah,
well.
jeez.
Sorry, I had to look away to make sure I had the right scriptural passage so people don't call me out because I'm embarrassed. But
and read your Bible.
It's Zechariah when he sees that vision of the high priest standing before the Lord, and there's two individuals evaluating that high priest. And the accuser is one of those individuals. The accuser says accurately, this guy does not have appropriate attire. He's got the bad garments on, and he's right. And the other individual, the angel of the Lord, says, we're going to replace those garments. And there's fun Jewish midrash on this about where do those new garments come from? They just pop out. They get them from the wardrobe or something. They just get them from a back room. Maybe they exchanged garments with the accuser. So the accuser gets the filthy rags. The high priest gets, the accuser being someone who normally is loud in the court. So that's kind of an exchange. But I would submit, and I think this is what the Christian witness is playing with, is that it's the angel of the Lord who exchanges his clean garments with that priest, with the person who normally shouldn't, by his own measure, by his own steel, shouldn't be allowed to be in the presence of God. So he gets those clean garments, and the angel gets the filthy garments. So that's just something I just kind of think about.
Is this are you talking about like the double exchange? Are you talking about like imputed righteousness? You bringing in your reformed?
No, Paul, don't spill. Don't. He's. This is just basic. This is just. Oh gosh. Don't put me. No, we're not going back into the grocer's freezer of static belief, propositional beliefs, Luke Thompson.
Okay, all right.
I'm just trying to encourage Tim here that I think the accuser says to all of us, in your own standing, you do have filthy rags. And if anyone is coming with clean clothes, it's because they're it's a gift
Yeah, we'll so to one point that I want to bring in, and I have no idea if this is right, of like what the text means objectively, but again, we all know that there is no such thing. So Sherry was saying this earlier, and Jason, my boy Jason, is here talking about five-giveness, and it's related to what I was talking about with gift. Like, in order, if everything is gift, you receive it as gift. If everything is truly grace, all is grace, and it's received as a gift, it is a gift. And Sherry was saying that the robes, I think this is what Sherry was saying, if she's still here, was saying it's about forgiveness and the unforgivable sin, because that's really the way that I view it. Like, that's salvation. It's like, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And I think that's because it's one and the same act. And he who's been forgiven forgives much. And I think the wedding robes are the robes of forgiveness. Because I think when you truly forgive everyone who's trespassed against you, that is salvation. That is to be forgiven. It's the same thing. And that's why it's the unforgivable sin, because if you won't wear the robes of forgiveness, you can't be at the feast. That's what the feast is.
A forgiveness feast.
Yeah. And you can't be there if you're unwilling to do it. You're out of the party by your own denial of that reality. I just love forgiveness. Forgiveness makes sense of everything.
It's beautiful.
But it's real beautiful in the abstract, real hard with people who've wronged you. So, I don't know. Let's get some. Matt's going to go, and I probably need to wrap it up because I got to make some tater tot casserole or hot dish. Casserole or hot dish? Which one, guys? Hot dish?
I have no idea what a hot dish is.
I'm from Maryland. We just eat seafood and clams and make spoons.
Yeah. I never heard hot dish until I met Ohioans. So
you're from Ohio?
No, from Florida, which means I'm halfway to Ohio in a way. We get all the retirees. So.
Oh yeah, you were. I didn't even realize. Can we have a quick? You're a cool person and hang out with Peugeot and Jordan Hall and James Cortez and Nate and all these people at the summit, Symbolic Summit. Are you a bigwig? Are you a big deal, Matt?
No. No one took photos of me, so that tells you how big of a deal I am. I'm still a new guy. I don't get Jordan Hall. I feel like he's playing a jazz I don't hear the melody for. I don't know, but that's probably, I just need to listen to it more. To listen to him.
He's highly technical.
Is that what it is?
I think so. I mean, because I don't like it's a lot of work for me to try to play that game, and I don't particularly like it. I don't find it to be fun to go that technical into stuff. But I think I've followed him enough and listened to him enough recently. I mean, a little bit, and because really, like, I'm only going to pay attention to you if you're in the little corner. Like, even Peugeot, I don't watch your shit unless you're talking to Paul.
Yeah, you're just a content creator. You're just a talking head.
Yeah. So like I go where the relationships are. Like, I'd way rather talk to you guys than Peugeot.
I wish you had been there, because the real conference, I mean, you don't need me to tell you this, but the real conference is the dinners, the random exchanges you have with people, the friendships that are born, those inspirational kind of one-on-one sessions. That's the real conference. It always is. And this is just a continuation of that.
Right. I would have loved to have hung out with Nate. I'm going to go visit Nate someday. We're going to meet. I mean, there's certain people that, like, I just have to, it's inevitable that I got to meet in real life at some point.
And at least there are wise, Martin Shaw, I'll just name him. Martin Shaw was wise enough to say that exactly what we're saying here, that the conference isn't behind the mic, it's face to face in the hallways, in the estuaries, and by any other word. And I was grateful to hear that, because I think sometimes people want to immanentize the eschaton.
Oh man,
conferences, and that's the people we need graybeards telling these little kids to simmer down and wait on God.
Simadana.
Yeah.
No, we will play. Listen, also Little Big. Guess what a major theme of Little Big is, Anselman? Tarot cards. I'm sorry. It'll make you mad. You should still read it. Tim, what do you say?
No one should listen to me as I am.
You should be
Should we listen to that?
Are you
As
kidding?
I am losing a battle with mental health issues. So
Oh,
just, pay me no mind.
Hey, no, you're all good, and I know enough from private interactions with you. You're doing a lot of the things one should be doing with that. I think there are certain people who, this is what I don't know. I don't even know if this will be a help to you, but this is what came to mind is, it's that Clem Snide lyric. Who's a follower of this corner? He used to be at one point because he knows Dr. Jim. Have you guys ever heard that story, by the way? Do you know who Clem Snide is first?
mm-mm.
So he's like a singer-songwriter, indie kind of singer. He's great. But Dr. Jim, who's in the little corner in, I believe is Dr. Jim in Idaho? He's in Idaho, I think. And he went to like a house show of Clem Snide where like a musician will come and just play at a house or whatever because his son is a musician. And he went and they were like sitting in the front row because his son's a big fan. And Clem Snide is up there getting ready for the show and he looks down and he's just like, Dr. Jim? And Dr. Jim's like, what? Because he had seen Dr. Jim talking to PVK. And so, like, I don't know, Little Corner is kind of a funny little world like that. But anyhow, the Clem Snide lyric is to be blessed is to be cursed as well. This is circling back to your mental health struggle, Tim. I think there are certain people who have cognitive capacities that allow them to see a lot, analyze a lot, and then you combine that with a certain temperament and certain neuroses, and it can be a real son of a bitch, and I have some of those proclivities, but like I have really good friends. I have a particular really good friend in mind right now that I'm thinking of who's very dear to me, who struggles a lot. Job, who's in the TLC, has been like that. Like Job, I mean, this is public knowledge, but Job has said, like, I mean, ever since he was young, like I think early teens, maybe even preteens, basically had suicidal ideation every day for like most of his life. And I think there are a number of people in this corner that are like that. And that is you talk about integrity. That's an incredible trial to undergo. But again, like here's the forgive me, but like fucked up thing. Can that be received as gift? Now that's a fucked up thing to say to somebody who's struggling with mental health. But so sorry if that comes across as difficult. But if it truly is one of those things of integrity, I don't know. The quick last thing, there's an illustration from the book Little Big. There's this guy, a character in the book. He's like the second protagonist of the book, who goes through this period of severe depression when this love of his life kind of leaves him, and he becomes homeless and he's a drunk for a long time. And then later on in the story, he kind of comes out of it and recovers, and he finds out, and there's this part where he's meditating on that and thinking about it, and he's just like, I wish, this is why fucking audiobooks suck too, is I wish I had written down the notes when I'm reading the book and I could go back and reference it. But there's a part in the book where he talks about that essentially the homelessness and the drunkenness gave him all these gifts of essentially like, it was almost like the gift of not caring what people thought about you anymore, so that later on in life he could navigate all this stuff, because he essentially became like anonymous and like out of sight, out of mind, just this thing that people pass over. But then like that very training was this thing that allowed him to do this thing later that he could have never essentially had any way else. And so like this homelessness and depression was like a training ground to give him the integrity to endure this thing later that he could have never anticipated. And And I really think when life is properly lived, and this is where it's really hard to live in the moment, like the conflict with my wife or whatever, to apply the wisdom to zoom out in that moment, to not take the thing that you don't want as like the curse, the suffering, the undergoing. Like it's hard as hell, man. It's like borderline impossible. And even that's gift, you know? So, I don't know. It's your particular suffering, man. And there's no avoiding it. I mean, there's no like way to make it easier besides, I don't know, I guess co-suffering in as much as we can through this medium. Praying for you. Telling you I care about you, because I do. I mean, you know that. And it's about all I got.
You know, something else, Tim, that Martin Shaw said this past weekend was that if you are not being fed, become bread. He said that that still felt a little too.
It's a hell of a line, though.
Yeah, it is. But maybe God makes us bread sometimes, and I think you're feeding us with your vulnerability. You know, and you're leading us through a liturgy of suffering, which I'm grateful for. So
and I don't know, Tim. I mean, I feel like you're a pretty transparent, vulnerable guy, but maybe you've gotten to the place of enough despair, and you're just like, you know, where you're just like, well, what's there to lose? Who gives a shit? Like, I'll just say this stuff on YouTube, you know, because you're just like, where else are you? But even that's like, I honestly think what you just said will help a lot of people and bless a lot of people. I mean, you're becoming bread.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. So I'll say
don't let anyone say, can I just quickly say, don't let anyone keep you outside the temple. That what you just did, your prayers today is you saying, Lord, have mercy on me, a sinner. And that's the prayer of someone who gets inside that temple. So.
And I just want to let's end this sucker on a criticism. Christians can't even explain the Trinity. Pfft, common Christian lies. There we go. Boom.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Heck yeah. Tender love and care. All right, brothers. Thanks for joining me, Matt. It was good to talk to you. We can talk baptism some other time. We never got there, but anyhow.
This is more important. This is more personal.
Absolutely. This was what was supposed to be. So peace out, guys. Have a good one. In as much as you can.